Welcome back, everybody, to Fantastic Firsts, the show from Daventry Studios and comic book curator that takes a look at the Marvel Universe, comic by comic, month by month, to look at the first appearances, first events, first really anything that happens in the pages of Marvel Comics. Today is episode 3, and we're calling this episode Into a Bigger Universe Now. You'll see what I mean a little later on in the show. We're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves, though. We start in April of 1940 this time around, and we start with issue number 3 of the series Daring Mystery Comics. So, once again, quick review. The release date of this comic is actually January 29th of 1940. The cover date is April 40, and that's what we're going by as we go through, just because it's easier. We're still going in chronological order. Again, the reason for the differences in the dates is if you published a book in January and put January on the cover, then the magazine shop or newsstand would take the comic down at the end of that month. If you published it in January and you had a later month on there, then it would stay for display and for sale through the end of that month. So just a trick that you see even from magazine companies and publishers today that will maximize the amount of time their book is on the shelf. So Daring Mystery Comics, number 3, cover date in April of 1940, release date actually January 29th, and the first story here is a bit of an anomaly, although we have seen it happen before already. It is Dale of the FBI, and we have the first appearance of FBI agent Dale Sturm, and this is the only time that Dale ever shows up. No real superpowers for Dale, just your ordinary run-of-the-mill FBI agent. The more significant first appearances in this story would be J. Edgar Hoover, who isn't named but heavily implied here, and Washington, D.C. and San Francisco. The cities both show up here for the first time in the Marvel Universe. Then we have the story Breeze Barton in the Miracle City, and this is a very appropriate story for this time of the year of existence. Doctor Strange 2, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, of course, just came out. And this is the first appearance of an alternate universe. So this is the first time we see evidence of the multiverse in Marvel Comics. I'm sure it was not quite planned as it ended up, but nevertheless, this is Earth 4040. This takes place, Universe 4040, and it is Breeze Barton, who is a bit of an adventurer, and it's his first appearance along with his gal Friday, who turns out to be Anne Barclay. And basically in this story, the World War happened a little bit differently, so there's kind of weird, different players in the war fighting over different areas of the world, such as in Africa, and that is the world that Breeze finds himself transported to through this particular portal. And it's revisited a little bit later on, but not really too much. But again, first appearance of the multiverse here, Earth 4040. Then we have the Purple Mask, and we have an ID change here because Dennis Burton apparently didn't like his moniker of the Laughing Mask. So he switches over, wears a purple mask now, calls himself naturally the Purple Mask, and continues from this point as that character. So Dennis Burton likes changing his identity pretty early on a bit. Got to get his collection of masks all used evenly. We've got the Phantom Reporter next, another kind of common type character that was pretty frequent in the Timely books at this time. You have a run-of-the-mill cop, doctor, detective, journalist by day, and someone that went and fought organized crime at night and other such dastardly deeds. And so that is the Phantom Reporter, aka Dick Jones, and he, as you might consider Clark Kent, is a mild-mannered reporter by day and a investigative beat-em-up mystery man by night. Then we go to the Powder Smoke Showdown, which is our text story from this book. And from there to the Trojack story, which, of course, as we know, is the kind of in-company ripoff of Kazar, but nothing new in that story. So we go to Marvex the Super Robot, and this is one of my favorite ongoing tales because Marvex is a humanoid robot, and he has to keep reminding poor Clara Crandall, who I don't know if it's hard to tell if Clara is being nice to him or if Clara is like falling for him because he keeps reminding her, I'm a robot, I don't have feelings, you can't fall in love with me. If you follow along with this story, it seems at the end of every episode, Clara's like, you're amazing, and Marvex is like, I'm a robot, I don't love you because I can't feel love because I'm a robot. So poor Clara. The fifth dimension shows up here, or at least a place called the fifth dimension. It's not clear if later fifth dimensions mentioned are the same. So this is kind of a wobbly first appearance, we'll call that. But that's where the antagonist comes from in this particular story. Then we have Captain Strong of the Foreign Legion. And Captain Bob Strong is a captain, as you might expect, of the Foreign Legion, as you also might expect. And this is the French Foreign Legion's first appearance, along with Captain Strong's first appearance. And the story takes place over in Algeria, which makes this Algeria's first appearance. And this is more or less a run-of-the-mill army story. Not quite, but similar to some stories that you might see later on in Tales of Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. But, of course, a little bit different setting, different country, of course. So that's Bob Strong. That's the French Legion. And next we have the Medicine Man, and this is just a really short kind of gag story. So we have the first appearance of Dr. Hokum here, but not a significant character by any stretch of the imagination. Just a little bit of a funny bit of paneling for this particular issue to end on. We go to Mystic Comics next. Mystic Comics number 2, publication date of 2/8/1940. Cover date, of course, still April of 1940. Then we have in its first story a name that might sound familiar to some Marvel fans here, and that is the Mastermind Excello, which, of course, sounds freaking corny or amazing, depending on your take on the matter. Of course, the most well-known Mastermind Excello is Amadeus Cho, who, of course, will come much, much later in this order. So, but the original Mastermind Excello was Earl Everett, and he was super genius, had a calculator-type brain, could work out any problem, and yet hasn't quite mastered the art of listening at doors without being caught. So if you read through this story, you'll find that he has to get out of a very difficult situation that he created for himself. But Mastermind Excello, genius extraordinaire, appears here for the first time. Again, more of a mystery man type character. Very, very similar to the Purple Mask, the Angel, other detective type characters, just a little bit differently in that he is super intelligent. Then we have the dynamic, rewind. We have Flexo the Rubber Man, but nothing new happens in that story. So we move to the Dynamic Man, and nothing new happens there either. So then we move to the tale of the Space Rangers. And we've got Bob Raleigh as the protagonist and the most famous of Space Rangers. And we have his loyal associate, Nibs. And they, as part of the Space Rangers, monitor the spaceways, so the transportation between planets, of trading goods and services across the known galaxy, solar system. And we also run into some Mercurians. So we don't actually go to the planet Mercury, but we meet some people from there in this. So this is the first time that we see them in this universe. So moving from there, actually, we're not going to move from there yet, because when I said this universe, I did want to clarify that this is another alternate universe. So this is Earth 4096 that this takes place in. And if your head's not spinning, it will once we get to more and more universes in later issues of the Marvel /Atlas/Timely timeline. Murderer's Mistake is the tech story in this issue. Then we have Taxi Taylor and his Wonder Car, which is a personal favorite of mine because we've got Taxi Taylor. Jim is his actual given name. He creates this basically Chitty Chitty Bang Bang on steroids kind of car and brings it to the U.S. government, and it, of course, is very brightly colored and not very inconspicuous, you might say. And he brings it to the U.S. government and says, "Hey, I invented this. Here you go. You guys can have it." And in stereotypical bureaucratic ways, they laugh him out of the room, and so then Taxi Taylor decides to use his vehicle to stop crime on his own, just to show everybody who's boss. So that's what he does. So we have Taxi Taylor and the Wonder Car, aka Wonder Taxi, in the story for the very first time. Then we have the Invisible Man, known as Dr. Gade, and the first appearance of Dr. Gade, the Invisible Man, is in this issue as well. This is a guy, scientist, gets pushed into some chemicals that of his own making, and is thought to be dead, but is actually just invisible, and he goes on to terrorize the mob that went after him in the first place, and he has quite a bit of fun doing it. So, good old Invisible Man, Leonard Gade. Then we go to Zara of the Jungle, and so if you're sensing a pattern here, it's because a lot of these early issues did follow a pattern. You know, they had maybe a story related to the war or spies, and then they had maybe an outer space story, and then a detective story, and then a jungle story. So this is the jungle story here. Zara is a new character, and she is very, very similar to Kazar and Trojak as well. So she befriends Captain Jeff Graves, who also shows up here for the first time. So again, very similar, defending her country, her land from outsiders, and of course, Captain Graves says, "Hey, come back to the States with me." And she's like, "Nope, gotta stay here because this is my home," which is the way most of these stories end, which is predictable, but also you have to keep in mind, very early days, they were trying to perfect this formula, and they had a formula that was selling, and so they wanted to make sure they touched all these bases for each of these comics. So, to wrap things up, we have Decor the Magician, who is a character we've seen before, but we have not seen Singapore before, which we do in this story. And also the island of Borneo. It doesn't specify, as you know, if you know geography, there's a couple countries on there, on that island, and we are not 100% sure which one it is. So we're just going to say Borneo. Leave it there. First appearance of Borneo. Singapore definitely is mentioned. Decor has to visit and do some investigating in Singapore. So we know that Singapore appears here for the first time. The last issue of April to go over is Marvel Mystery Comics, of course, the flagship series of Timely at the time, and this was first published February 20th, of course, cover dated April 1940. Not a whole lot going on here. The Human Torch, the Angel, and Prince Namor all have nothing new to offer us in terms of first appearances. The Masked Raider story may or may not have the first appearance of Mexico. It mentions Mexico. The plot of the story is that there's cattle rustling going across the U.S.-Mexico border, and there are several scenes that take place near that border, but it's never really specified what side of the border they're on, and so we're not 100% sure. So if you have a few $100 up to a few $1,000 and can find this issue and want to hedge your bets to get the first appearance of Mexico, this may be where it appears for the first time. Then we go to The Shrinking Spy, which is the tech story. And moving past that, we go to Electro, the Marvel of the Age. And this is kind of the gold mine for first appearances in this issue. We've got Electro Headquarters that shows up for the first time. This is basically a site where Professor Zog runs the operation, and he has a bunch of agents that go out, and if they find something fishy in the entire country, he dispatches Electro, his robot, the Marvel of the Age, to investigate. So Illinois and Chicago appear here for the first time. So do Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, all for the first time here. And remember, we had a previous discussion about Chicago in a previous issue where the myth, or probable myth, is that Chicago and Illinois appear there for the first time, or at least Illinois. And of course, that had to do with a college mentioned, and that college mentioned doesn't have a football team, so it doesn't match up to what happens in the story. So this is definitely more likely, again, if you're really focusing on pinning down the first appearance of Illinois and Chicago. They happen here. Ferret Mystery Detective and The Adventures of Kazar have nothing new for us, so we move on to the next month, being May of 1940. Back to Daring Mystery Comics, and that was first published March 1st with its cover date of May 1940. We go through the Purple Mask tale, and we go through the K9, not K9, K4 and his Sky Devils. We go through those two stories, nothing new. Also nothing new in the Monaco Prince of Magic story either. Then we do have some new people. We've got Whirlwind Carter of the Interplanetary Secret Service. So take some FBI-type tales and mix them up with the Space Ranger tale that we had in the last issue of Mystic Comics, and you get this. You get Henry Whirlwind Carter and his associate Brenda Hale, and this takes place in Earth Universe 5464. So outer space, another universe going on in this one. And again, more of an interplanetary adventure taking place on the skyways. A lot of spaceships flying around and checking off the outer space story box for this particular issue. Marvex the Super Robot doesn't take us anywhere new, doesn't introduce us to any particularly new faces. Then we have G-Man Don Gorman. So again, with the kind of newer shift to not necessarily all mystery men, but official, like investigative FBI, junior G-Men type characters. So Don Gorman is here for the first time in this story. He is the aforementioned G-Man government agent. And Los Angeles, California. The City of Angels appears here for the first time. Marvex the Super Robot, nothing new there. I already said that. I'm going backwards. Now I will go forward. Breeze Barton. Again, second story here. Still taking place in that alternate universe. We have Frenchie, who turns out to be one of Breeze Barton's friends. Not a very significant character, but the story didn't last for much longer than this. So this is Frenchie's first and one of his only appearances. Text story is Outlaw Buster. Then we've got Trojak the Tiger Man back, and we see Jerry Alton showing up for the first time, another outsider visiting Africa in this particular story. The last issue we're going to go over is one of the big significant issues in Marvel history, and that's why that's one of the reasons why I cut the episode off after this issue, because it's so much fun to read this issue. So it's Marvel Mystery Comics number 7. March 20th is the publication date, and it starts off in a very similar way with the first Human Torch, or the first story being the Human Torch story. And in this story, the Human Torch, Jim Hammond, joins the police force for the first time. So he becomes a police officer in New York City. And what we're going to do here as we go through these stories is we're going to keep track of how many times he destroys a window or a roof or a door or a wall at police headquarters or anywhere, because he's not a very considerate, and he could be excused for this perhaps because he's a synthezoid, but there's so many times where you have the police chief or someone sitting in their office, and here comes the Human Torch, just flies in through the window, drops in through the roof. So we're going to keep track on a counter here of how many times the Human Torch goes through a roof or door or window or anything like that. So we'll see how much damage that he actually ends up causing. The Angel, Master of Men. Nothing new here. Now, here's the significant story. And of course, this also actually ties a bit into the Human Torch too, but this is where the activity happens that leads to everything. So in the Prince Namor story, we see Prince Namor in one of his moods where he hates the people that walk on land. And so he decides to set up a base in the Statue of Liberty. So that appears here for the first time, along with the Empire State Building also for the first time. So Namor is going to attack New York, and there's no way to counter him. He's got an army of Atlanteans that are going to back him up. And the powers that be decide that there is a solution to taking down Namor, and it is the Human Torch. So this is the first time that it is implied, it is mentioned, it is thrown out there that these stories are taking place in a shared universe. So when I first read this issue, I started at the beginning in 1939 and read through these. When I got to this one, it was the reading equivalent of seeing Nick Fury on the screen for Iron Man, because he's telling Mr. Stark, you're part of a bigger universe now. And in this book, they're saying, okay, we need to take down the Submariner. Who's going to help? The Human Torch just joined the police. We're going to rely on him. So the battle will start up next issue, but this is where the Clash of Titans is set to begin. So absolutely legendary book here, where the first indication of a shared universe in Marvel takes place. So super fun read, super exciting. The Masked Raider doesn't have anything quite as exciting in it. Nothing new there. Blasting Bombers is the title of the text story. Electro, Marvel of the Age. We have a new villain here by the name of Boss Sarpo. Not a particularly long-lasting villain, but his scheme is to is to take advantage of the people that have been flooded out by the flooding on the Ohio River. So you will see some people say this is the first appearance of Ohio. It might be, but those people also might not realize that the Ohio River is not just in Ohio. So it's never mentioned what state. It is mentioned that it is the Ohio River. So definitely the first appearance of the Ohio River, if you're concerned about that. Not necessarily the first appearance of Ohio itself. We wrap up with Ferret and Kazar stories that do not feature any new characters, and so that also wraps up our show. And I'm also noticing my shirt keeps changing color based on how much light is getting into my camera lens. So hopefully that was not too big of a distraction. But super exciting stuff going on in this batch. I'm excited to jump into the next stage, which sees, like I said before, the Battle of the Titans, fire versus water, Namor, and the Human Torch going at it. And you'll have to stay tuned to get updates on how that goes. Of course, feel free to read it yourself. Feel free to like and subscribe to our channel, the Daventry Studios channel, and follow Comic Book Curator on Instagram as well. Have a good one, everybody, and until next time, Excelsior and make mine timely. Or Marvel. Or Atlas. All of the above.